I'm Nigel Slater. I love simple cooking, and my favourite dishes are often based on the simplest combinations. And that's what I'll be looking at this series. From sweet and sour, to soft and crunchy, to something spicy with something cool. All those elements that make something quite exciting to eat. It's acidic, and it's hot, and it's sweet, and it's sour, and it's all mixed up. I'll be cooking the classics. And some surprising new twists. Wow. I want to show you why they work so well, so you'll feel confident to create your own food marriages that are made in heaven. The whole thing just works together on the plate. Today, I'll be looking at surf and turf, the classic pairing of fish and meat. Some of our most successful recipes combine the food of the land and the sea on the same plate, with delicious results. From delectable treats to the freshest of suppers, I want to show you that there's more to this perfect pairing than just meat and fish. So as well as sharing my favourite surf and turf recipes, I'll be discovering how others do it too. It is absolutely gorgeous. Traditionally, surf and turf is all about lobster and steak, but I prefer something a bit less extravagant. Surf and turf really does smack of hedonism. The most expensive piece of fish, the most expensive piece of meat. But I've got something much more interesting than that. If you go to the other end of the fishmonger's slab, you find the cheap fish, such as mackerel, especially smoked mackerel. Mackerel is my favourite fish, and a great place to start exploring this perfect pairing. To keep this really simple, I want to make a classic salad that mixes the surfy fish with some turfy bacon. The base of my salad is a few boiled salad potatoes. These very beautiful whole smoked mackerel. If I can't find these, then I just buy mackerel fillets. It's just whatever's around and whatever's convenient. But the real joy of these is that the flesh stays really creamy and soft. Another reason I love buying smoked fish is that I don't even have to cook it. And part of the thing I love about this recipe is that it's exactly the opposite of what everybody thinks surf and turf is all about. It's a very humble salad. So that's the surf, and now I need the turf. And for that, I'm using streaky bacon. You can use smoked or unsmoked, streaky or back. You can even use pancetta if you wanted to. I like my bacon crisp, which gives me time to make a salad dressing. Nothing fancy, just one with a mild mustard base. Maybe a few capers. Their salty bite feels like it fits in this dish. Capers really are one of those ingredients you have to check that everybody likes them, because not everybody treats them as a friend. To the capers and mustard, a splash of white wine vinegar, pepper, and a generous glug of olive oil. Now, parsley is a really good herb to put with fish and to put with bacon, but I'm actually going to use dill. And I'm going to use dill because it works so well with smoked fish. This salad needs the rustic quality of raw onion, but to soften the harshness, I'm soaking it in white wine vinegar. So put the onion into the dressing, and it's very slightly softened, but that's not really the point. The point is to take away those very coarse top notes that actually, for me, can ruin a salad. Once the potatoes are cooked soft to the point of a knife, they can be introduced to the dressing. I've left the skins on because I like the flavour of these very young potato skins, but if you want to peel them, then do. And then the whole lot goes in with my lovely mackerel. And finally, I can mix the meat to the fish. This salad will be great as it is, but a few snips of bacon will take it to a whole new level. The idea for bacon with mackerel actually came from something I had years ago in Scotland. where I had a mackerel that had been fried in bacon fat, and it was so good, I never forgot it. That's delicious. For me, this is surf and turf at its best. You couldn't get further from a plate of lobster and steak, but I'd take this humble version any day of the week. It's cheaper too. As with everything in life, good cooking is all about getting the right balance. In the kitchen, how you juggle your ingredients can make the difference between a good supper and a great one. Flavours should complement each other, not overwhelm. There's one recipe I make that shows this off to perfection. The whole concept of meat and fish together is quite a big deal. There's some people who probably just can't take it at all. But if you use the ingredients subtly, they won't even know they're there. There's a way of using fish not as an ingredient but as a seasoning. It's sort of a cook's secret. This is a magical recipe for those who aren't convinced by the surf and turf concept. You can't taste the fish, but it totally transforms the meat. At this recipe's heart is some good quality lamb shanks. I'm going to slow cook them in the oven, but first they need browning over a high heat. I want all those crusty, tasty bits to stick to the pan because they're going to dissolve when I put the liquid in. A few roughly chopped onions and a sliced clove of garlic will give my sauce some body. This is where the first bit of the secret seasoning comes in. It's only a tiny ingredient, but it packs a big punch. The surf part of this recipe is anchovy. For such a strongly flavoured ingredient, it's great that it can be used subtly as well. Nobody but the cook's going to know it's there. A sprig of rosemary and a couple of bay leaves will add a delicious earthiness to balance the rich lamb. Now I've got some stock, and it can be any stock really. There's so much flavour going on in there that it doesn't really matter what you use. And then some red wine. Just something that's lying around. It doesn't have to be your best bottle. And about the same quantity as stock. This won't cover the shanks, it will just come part of the way up. And because we're cooking it with a lid on, then it'll cook in the liquid and in its own steam. So that goes into the oven for a good couple of hours to let the meat get really tender and the ingredients develop and mellow. The anchovy's done wonderful things to the sauce. It's not like adding salt or pepper or lemon juice. It's a completely individual seasoning. But the wonderful thing is you don't quite know what it is. All you know is added a depth and an intrigue to the sauce. I like to leave the shanks to rest so the meat stays really juicy. It also gives me a chance to add a final seasoning to the sauce, a handful of fresh herbs and a few extra anchovies. So once that's simmering, take out the shanks. But it's filling and it's hearty and it's not terribly expensive and it comes with a secret. The meat comes off the bone very nicely. You know, there's a real depth of flavour there. Somehow it's as if the anchovy has boosted the flavour of the lamb, but you never know what the secret seasoning was. All you know is that it's absolutely delicious. You probably wouldn't think of this as surf and turf, but it's exactly the reason this dish works so well. The lamb is the main ingredient, but I reckon the anchovy is the real star here. You know, I'm a city boy, but I love the idea of living on an island. The fact that we've got both of nature's larders, the land and the sea, for inspiration. But some people are so jammy, they have both, right on their doorstep.
I used to go fishing with my father, and we're very much a believer of if you catch it, you eat it. There's nothing better than actually catching your dinner, really, whichever way you do it.
Ian Taylor is a fisherman. He and his crew mainly fish for sea bass off the beautiful Weymouth coast in Dorset.
That's one now. I'll just wheel this one in.
But Ian's favourite ocean offering by far is scallops.
I do a bit of scallop diving as well, and you can't beat hand-caught scallops, really. They're the best in the world.
Ian has invited me to come along to one of the crew's after-sail treats. He cooks scallops with chorizo right on the back of the boat. So it sounds like I'm in for a tasty lunch. First, the scallops have to be removed from their shells.
What you do to open a scallop is you have the crown shape facing you. You've always got a slit in the side of the scallop. So you push the knife in that way where the slit is, and you just nick the muscle, and that opens the shell. And then pull the skirt off. Knife at the back, cut down to the bottom of the shell, and then you scallop underneath, and the whole thing comes out. You want to leave as much as you can in the shells. And then what you want to do is just get rid of the intestine bit, which you've got to be careful when you do that bit, because otherwise you'll pull the roe off.
I mean, where I fall out with a lot of professional chefs is that they throw the roe away. But
you're losing.
I like the coral.
You're losing half the scallop.
I love the roe.
It tastes all right. It's good.
That's my favourite bit.
I'm glad you said that.
Cracking bit, isn't it?
And the beauty of fresh scallops is if you really want to, you can eat them whole like that.
Yeah.
And all right. There's a seagull. Look at that seagull. But nothing's wasted at sea.
I mean, scallops aren't really your business, are they? They're more for fun.
Yeah, I mean, bass fishing and scuba diving is my business. But as a byproduct of the scuba diving, we often get scallops to eat. I don't sell them normally, we just eat them. I love scallops. We've eaten them in every way imaginable, really. So, yeah, we've curried them, done all sorts with them. I quite often have a scallop sandwich, which is literally flour them, get the frying pan going with a bit of butter in it, fry them 2 or 3 minutes either side, put them in a sandwich, and this, like that's.
You see, if I did that,
cracking.
that cost me 20 quid.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, do you like that whole thing, that idea of eating meat with fish?
Yes, yeah, it's a good combination. Works well. So you get the different textures, different flavours.
The idea of having something that you've just caught and you're just sticking it in the pan and see what happens. You know, it's my sort of cooking, really.
This spicy sausage is the perfect partner for Ian's scallops.
The chorizo in.
See, already that smells fantastic. So all those orangey juices.
Yeah, will leak out into the pan.
Yeah. Very nice. Oh, just smell that now.
What we do. Put some of these in.
And these really are flash fried, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to do them a couple of 3 minutes, and that's it. You could eat them as they are now, so you're not cooking them for any other reason than taste, really. I like to make sure that the chorizo is actually cooked, like if anything, overcooked, because then it gives it a bit crispy, you know, and you've got a crunch to it then, and then the scallops are soft.
Those tiny little things that just make something great rather than good, getting the textures right. and getting the mixture of crisp and soft. And these are going to be a bit spicy, aren't they?
They should be a bit, yeah, a bit of chilli there. I love spice. I think they're near enough done. And just to finish it off, just a bit of honey.
A bit of runny honey.
Not too much.
Isn't that beautiful? Oh, thank you.
The shell sort of finishes it off nicely as well.
Yeah, there were too many of these. Ended up as ashtrays and lampshades.
Yeah, they're great for food. Who wants some then, lads?
So. Oh my goodness.
Thanks very much.
That is such a treat.
Yeah? Good.
Ritz?
There's not too many flavours.
No, there's not. It's spicy and it's sweet.
Okay.
I was scared when I saw you put the honey in. In fact, I wanted to shout stop.
What, put the honey in?
Yeah, but I was wrong.
Yeah?
I was completely wrong, but it's lovely.
Cracking, Skipper, cracking. Yeah.
It really is, honestly. I mean, anybody who isn't sure about surf and turf, this is the dish to give them, isn't it?
This is like real, this is extreme surf and turf.
It is absolutely gorgeous.
I love any excuse to experiment, and dreaming up a sweet recipe for surf and turf has given me the perfect chance to play. You'd have to be a more adventurous cook than me to make a surf and turf pudding, but I do like the idea of salt and sugar together. So to get as close to surf and turf as I can in a dessert, I'm going to try mixing chocolate with some sea salt to make a wonderful treat. Let's call them sea salt chocolate snaps. It starts with one of my favourite things to do in the kitchen. Something I love about melting chocolate. And yet it's one of those questions that I'm asked more than any other, is how do you melt chocolate? I'm told the easiest way is in a microwave, but I like to do it the old-fashioned way, with the chocolate broken into small pieces over a pan of simmering water. And I don't poke and I don't prod and I don't stir. I just leave the chocolate to melt itself. Absolutely love pistachio nuts. They remind me of being on holiday, just sitting there with a drink as the sun goes down, shelling wonderful little nuts. A handful of any chopped nuts would be great for this recipe. It's worth keeping an eye on the chocolate and just pushing the unmelted chocolate down into the melted. So no stirring, just pushing the solid into the liquid. Once the chocolate started to melt, you can actually turn the heat off because the residual heat will do everything we need. I also fancy throwing a couple of handfuls of toasted almonds in too. This really isn't the time to do other things. I know it's tempting, but they burn in a heartbeat, they really do. When the almonds are golden brown, a sprinkling of sugar will add a lovely toasted caramel flavour. Extraordinary how nuts straight from the jar taste of almost nothing, and then give them some warmth and a tiny little bit of sugar and they taste amazing and they smell like deepest autumn. Once they're glistening and smelling sweet, they're done. Now comes the bit I love. Just spoon the melted chocolate onto some greaseproof paper. Now I think that these are much nicer when the chocolate is really thin and crisp. And there's no right and wrong chocolate for this. If you like milk chocolate, then use it. But I like the idea of chocolate that's quite dark and bitter with the sugar and the nuts. This is where you've got to work fast, while the chocolate is still soft.
don't need many of these. You don't even need them at all if you don't want to. It's just that I like having 2 flavours of nut. And then the salt. This is where the surf comes in. I love the idea of the flakes of salt and the sugar and then the lovely earthy chocolate. And then I just fancy something silly. I'm going to put some crystallized rose petals on. Could be violets. The thing about crystallized rose and violet petals is that they're really sugary. So what you get is little explosions of sugar and salt in your mouth at the same time. And then, of course, the deep earthiness of the chocolate. That's as near as I get to turf.
These are at their best, chilled and crisp, so just 15 to 20 minutes in the fridge ought to do the trick. I can't wait to see how these turn out.
It's extraordinary. The grittiness of the sugar, little grains of sea salt, the toasted nuts, and then the gorgeous melted chocolate. It's really, really wonderful. And you get fingers to lick as well.
These are a must-make for everyone. Trust me, that sprinkling of salt really is the icing on the cake. I'm back in Weymouth with fisherman Ian and his wife Kathy. This time it's my turn to cook, and I fancy trying something a bit different. This samphire has got a lovely, crisp, salty flavour and will be perfect for the recipe I have in mind.
I'm not sure I can beat your scallops,
Sure, you have a good go.
because they were wonderful. But I wanted the idea really of taking surf and turf back to absolute basics and doing it as cheaply as possible.
All right.
I'm going to chop up a little bit of bacon.
I'm using pancetta, but you can use any type of bacon. The only other ingredient to go in this dazzling fresh samphire. It's a type of sea vegetable which you can get from good fishmongers and some supermarkets.
You know this, don't you?
We see it around on the beaches. Not something I've actually ever gone and picked up and eaten before. So, I'm into that sort of thing as well. So it'd be quite interesting to see what it tastes like.
I eat this stuff raw, but I don't want to cook it for more than a few seconds, to be honest with you.
You try a bit raw?
Yeah, definitely.
That is very salty. It's very sea tasting. It's not salty, but it's sea tasting. Yep.
Abby?
Definitely
Yep.
fishy.
Yep.
So that is marsh samphire. But then I picked this today very carefully.
See that a lot on the beach now.
Yeah.
This is the rock samphire. Have you eaten this raw?
No,
No, well, tell me what you think.
that's completely different.
Yeah, it's different. It's got like a
Lemon.
sharp taste to it, like a bit of like a lemon or something.
Citrus, isn't it?
I would have thought you need to steam that, but I think it's just worth trying it.
It does look lovely. It's nice, isn't it?
It smells really good.
Well, let's see. So, a bit of both on the fork at the same time, I think. And mind, it's going to be a bit hot to start with.
Okay. Hot.
You've got the bacon there, haven't you? And then the salt water, the sort of sea-ness with it as well.
It's still nice and crunchy as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
Only
just
a
seconds. Isn't it?
second's cooking.
This go nice with a drop of wine, I think. On a glass?
Oh yes, please. Nice cold glass.
Like a glass?
I'd love one,
Yeah?
thank you. I think that surf and turf is you've got the excuse, the saltiness,
Yeah.
to have a drink.
There you go.
Cheers, thank you.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Well, cheers, thank you very
Cheers.
much. The origins of the name Surf and Turf are really to do with lobster and steak. But in fact, the most useful meat when you're working with fish is pork. And Parma ham will really bring out the sweetness of fish.
And so that is exactly what I'm going to do with this really quick recipe, which starts off very simply with sage leaves and a couple of slices of Parma ham.
I like to wrap a fish fillet, something like trout, up in a little bit of bacon or a little bit of Parma ham. And what happens is that the fat in the ham or the bacon just melts a little and it bastes the fish as it cooks and it sweetens it. You just roll up the fish fillet.
A skewer will make sure my ham and its lovely juices cook snugly alongside the trout.
So I'll pop that in the oven, about 15-20 minutes, we'll have a look.
Some roughly chopped parsley and a squeeze of fresh lemon will season the dish beautifully.
There's truly great smells on a rainy day. There's something baking in the oven that's all buttery and lemony. And then these wonderful buttery juices. And there's everything in there, the lemon, the butter, the parsley, that little bit of melted fat from the Parma ham, and of course the fish juices, all working together and smelling wonderful.
This dish works so well because of how the fish is cooked, in all those lovely sweet and salty juices from the Parma ham. Cooking the fish alone just wouldn't give you the same utterly scrumptious results. Surf and turf. What a brilliantly simple, perfect pairing to inspire some truly fabulous dishes, and easy to adapt and make your own too. Next time, I'm exploring the contrast of spicy and cool, fiery flavours tempered with something soothing. These taste sensations make simple dishes into really special ones.
The lamb's mouth-poppingly hot, and then you get this super cool salad with pomegranate and cucumber. And the whole thing just works together on the plate.